It consumed 8 tons of concrete every 78 seconds, 20 tons of it swinging through the air on a cable thinner than your wrist, 700 feet above men who had nowhere to run. They called it progress. The machines that built Hoover Dam killed at least 96 men, probably more. The real number? We'll never know. Because when you die gasping for air in a tunnel filled with truck exhaust, your death certificate doesn't say carbon monoxide poisoning. It says pneumonia. 42 men died that way, not one listed as poisoned. We're going to find out what it was like to work under those machines and why the men operating them didn't stand a chance. This is the story of the deadliest construction job in American history. Hell's Bore, 1931. The Great Depression had America by the throat. Unemployment hit 18%. A man with a family would take any job at all, which is how 5,000 of them ended up in the bottom of Black Canyon, 30 miles into the Nevada desert, staring at a problem nobody had ever solved, the Colorado River. 1,450 miles of it, carving through 6 states, flooding every spring, drying up every summer, dragging millions of tons of silt to the Gulf of California. For 12 million years, that river did whatever it wanted. Spanish settlers saw the reddish color of that silt and gave it the name we know it by. Colorado Red. The plan was to stop it, build a dam bigger than anything ever attempted. 726 feet of concrete, wedged into a canyon so narrow you could throw a rock across it. But first, they had to move the river. That meant drilling 4 tunnels through solid rock, each one 56 feet in diameter, 4,000 feet long, nearly 3 miles of tunnel combined, all of it through canyon walls that had been baking in the desert sun since before humans walked upright. They had 2.5 years to finish. Miss the deadline, pay $3,000 a day in penalties. Do the math. That's $1 million a year. In 1931, money. 6 companies, Inc., a consortium of construction firms that had never worked together before, had put up a $5 million performance bond. No single company could raise that kind of money. So they pooled their resources. Morrison Knudsen, Utah Construction, J.F. Shea, Pacific Bridge, McDonald and Kahn, and a joint venture between Bechtel, Kaiser, and Warren Brothers. 6 companies. One impossible job. They hired Frank Crow to run it. Crow had spent 20 years building dams for the Bureau of Reclamation and private companies. Arrow Rock Dam in Idaho, Jackson Lake Dam in Wyoming, Teton Dam in Washington. He'd been dreaming about Hoover Dam specifically. When the government changed its policy and started contracting dam projects to private companies instead of building them directly, Crow left his government job to chase this one project. He joined Morrison Knudsen and convinced them to organize the consortium. He knew what the job required. He'd worked on the government's cost estimates. He knew the numbers. He knew the timeline. And he knew they needed a machine that didn't exist yet. So they built a machine, called it a drilling jumbo. If you saw one today, you'd call it a death trap. They called it the only way to get the job done. It was a 10-ton international truck with a 3-story metal scaffold welded to the bed. Platforms stacked on platforms. Between 24 and 30 pneumatic jackhammers mounted on those platforms, all pointing forward. Compressed air screaming through pipes. Steel drills chewing into rock. 7 levels of men hanging on for life while the whole rig shook itself apart. Woody Williams designed it. Just welded steel platforms and drill mounts on a truck chassis. The elegance was in the simplicity. The jumbo backed up to the tunnel face. The drills bit in, 4 feet deep, 8 feet, 12 feet, 20 feet into solid canyon wall. 48 holes drilled at once. Then the jumbo rolled out, and other men with shorter life expectancies, climbed in with dynamite. They packed a ton of explosives for every 14 feet of tunnel. Then they ran. Could it actually work? The first jumbo fired up in May 1931. Nevada side. Lower portal. The temperature inside that tunnel hit 140 degrees by noon. The compressed air system ran on 500 pneumatic drills, Ingersoll Rand, purchased specifically for the job. Compressor plants installed at both ends of each tunnel, 2-inch to 6-inch diameter pipes snaking through the workings like arteries. The air pressure alone could kill you if a line burst, and it got hotter. 140 degrees. Your skin blistered if you touched the wrong surface. Your lungs burned breathing that air. Men collapsed. 4 a week during that first summer. Heat prostration, the official cause of death. 16 men died from the heat between June 25th and July 26th alone. 1 month, 16 dead. Their hearts just stopped. But that wasn't the only thing killing them. The jumbos worked, 8 of them built over the summer, 1 for each working face, because they drilled from both ends of each tunnel, plus access points halfway through called adits. The rock broke. 16,000 cubic yards a day combined from all 4 tunnels. The broken rock went into 10-ton international dump trucks, gasoline-powered, running inside enclosed tunnels with no ventilation. They finished the diversion. Tunnels in spring 1932, a full year early. Frank Crow had gambled everything on those jumbos. The gamble paid off. 6 companies avoided the penalty fees, started recovering their $5 million bond investment, but nobody told the men what would happen when you ran gasoline-powered trucks inside a tunnel with no ventilation. What they didn't know yet was already killing them. The jumbos drilled the holes, but getting the broken rock out? That was a different beast. They needed shovels, not the kind you hold in your hands, the kind that weigh 100 tons and eat canyons for breakfast. 100 tons of fury. The Marion Power Shovel Company built machines that could scoop 3.5 cubic yards of rock in one bite. Modified buckets, electric motors, treads that chewed through rubble like it was sand. Each shovel weighed 100 tons, stood as tall as a 2-story building. The bucket alone could hold enough rock to fill a pickup truck. They had to remove 1.5 million cubic yards of material just to reach bedrock at the river bottom, 130 feet down through mud, silt, and loose rock. Why that deep? Because if you're building a dam 726 feet tall, the equivalent of a 60-story building, you don't set it on mud. You set it on rock that hasn't moved in 100 million years. The shovels worked 24 hours a day, 3 shifts, 8 hours on, 16 off. Operators made $1, $25 an hour. Best pay on the job. General laborers made 50 cents. Skilled workers made somewhere in between. In 1931, when the average American made $1,400 a year, these men were pulling down decent money. They earned it. Picture this. You're sitting in a steel cage mounted on a 100-ton machine. It's 140 degrees. You're on the canyon floor, 700 feet below the rim. Above you, men are dangling from ropes, blasting loose rock off the canyon walls with jackhammers and dynamite. Those men, they called them high scalers. They're trying not to drop boulders on your head. They're making 68 cents an hour, hanging from ropes in safety belts or bosun chairs, swinging across empty space, using 44-pound jackhammers to drill holes in the canyon walls, then packing those holes with dynamite, then scrambling to safety before the blast. Below you, the broken rock from the last tunnel blast, thousands of tons of it, sharp, unstable, piled in heaps 20 feet high. Your job? Scoop it into trucks. Keep it moving. Don't stop. Because if you stop, the whole project stops. And stopping costs $3,000 a day. The shovel bit into the rock. The bucket came up full, swung over, dumped into a 10-ton international dump truck. The truck roared off down the tunnel or down the haul road if you were working the canyon floor. Another truck pulled up. You swung the bucket back, dug again, for 8 hours. The heat was constant. The dust was thick enough to chew. The noise from the electric motors and the grinding treads made conversation impossible. You communicated with hand signals. You watched the rock, watched for unstable piles that could shift and bury the truck, watched for high scalers above who might dislodge something, watched the truck drivers who were exhausted and making mistakes. Howard Cornelius ran a shovel, 23 years old. Oiler. That meant he kept the machine lubricated, made sure the gears didn't seize up in the heat and dust. Midnight, sometime in 1933. Tunnel 2. His shovel was clearing rock from an adit, a side passage. The bit went in. There was a flash, a sound like the air splitting open. The shovel had hit a mist hole, dynamite that didn't go off during the last blast, still sitting there in the rock, waiting. The explosion threw debris like shrapnel, rocks the size of fists flying at hundreds of feet per second. Cornelius took a rock to the forehead right above the eye, fractured his skull. They got him to the Boulder City Hospital. He died the next morning at 8:22. He had a sister in Glendo, Wyoming, Mrs. E. Moffett. She got the telegram. That's what happened when the shovels found something they shouldn't. But most of the time, the shovels just worked. Dug, lifted, dumped, all day, all night. The operators couldn't hear over the engine noise, couldn't see through the dust, just kept digging until their shift ended, if they lived that long, because the real danger wasn't the shovels, it was what was above them. By June 1933, they dug deep enough, bedrock exposed, river diverted through the tunnels. Cofferdams built, huge earthen walls blocking the river upstream and downstream of the construction site. The upstream cofferdam alone was 98 feet high, contained 568,000 cubic yards of earthfill and 157,000 cubic feet of rock. The canyon floor was dry for the first time in 12 million years. Time to pour concrete, 4.4 million cubic yards of it, enough to pave a 2-lane highway from San Francisco to New York. How do you move that much concrete into the bottom of a canyon so narrow that trucks can barely turn around? You don't use trucks. You use cables. Frank Crowe had been designing cableway systems his whole career. This one was the biggest he'd ever built. 5 temporary cableways, 20-ton capacity each, plus 1 permanent government cableway rated for 150 tons. The cables stretched across the canyon, tower to tower. The towers themselves were mounted on rails, so they could move 500 feet up or down the canyon as the work progressed. Self-propelled, electric hoists, precision controls. On paper, it was brilliant. In practice, 20 tons of steel and wet concrete swinging through the air every 78 seconds, and the man operating the crane couldn't even see where it was going. Steering by braille, one operator said later, that bucket was roaring down the canyon just as fast as they could get it there, and I couldn't see it, just had to feel it. The bucket itself was Frank Crowe's design. He held 2 patents on it. 7 feet tall, almost 7 feet in diameter, steel. When it was full of concrete, it weighed 20 tons, bottom dump design, meaning when it reached the pour site, the bottom opened and 8 cubic yards of concrete fell out in one sudden mass. The bucket hung from a cable. The cable ran through a pulley system on the cableway. The cableway operator sat in a control tower, working levers, watching nothing, trusting his instincts. 1 bucket every 78 seconds at peak production. That's what they needed to stay on schedule. Below, on the canyon floor, men called puddlers waited, 5 or 6 of them per pour site. When the bucket arrived, it dumped. The concrete hit the form, raised the level 1 to 2 inches. The puddlers immediately started stamping and vibrating the concrete into place, packing it down, making sure there were no air pockets, no voids, because voids meant weakness, and weakness in a dam this size meant catastrophic failure downstream. While they worked, another bucket was already on its way. The concrete came from 2 plants, one on the canyon floor, the low-level mixing plant, 4,000 feet upstream. Concrete transported by rail to the cableway pickup point. the other on the canyon rim, the high-level plant. Both plants could produce 280 cubic yards per hour. The concrete was mixed with aggregate that ranged from pea-sized gravel to 9-inch stones, depending on where in the dam it would be placed. Getting the wrong aggregate in the wrong place could compromise the structure. So the bucket operator had to know exactly which column he was dropping into, had to feel it through the cable, had to trust his rhythm. How did they prevent it from tearing itself apart? They didn't. They just kept fixing it. The cables wore, the pulleys seized, the buckets bent, the forms cracked. Men worked in shifts keeping the machinery running. Welders, mechanics, riggers, working at heights, working in heat, working under buckets that swung overhead every 78 seconds. One accident with a cableway, the records show. One official cableway fatality. But ask yourself this: a 20-ton bucket swinging through the air above your head every 78 seconds for 2 years straight. How many near misses do you think there were? How many times did a cable slip? A bucket swing wild? How many men dove out of the way and never reported it because reporting it meant stopping work, and stopping work meant the foreman would find someone else to do your job? The machines worked. The concrete poured. By the end of June 1933, they'd placed 24,000 cubic yards. By May 29, 1935, they'd poured the last bucket, 3.4 million cubic yards in the dam alone, another 1.1 million cubic yards in the powerhouse and other structures. Ahead of schedule, under budget, a miracle of engineering, but miracles have a price, and the men paid it. 24 hours in the hole. The jumbos drilled, the shovels dug, the cables swung, but someone had to keep them running. That meant maintenance. In the tunnels, that meant breathing. The jumbos needed compressed air for the drills. That part worked fine. What didn't work was the lack of ventilation for the men. May 1931. First cruise in the tunnels. Temperature outside, 100 degrees. Temperature inside, 140. No air movement, just heat and fumes. Because 6 companies, the consortium building the dam, made a decision. They used gasoline-powered trucks inside the tunnels, 10-ton international dump trucks, engines roaring, exhausts spewing carbon monoxide into an enclosed space. No fans, no ventilation shafts, just men and machines and poison. Nevada had outlawed gasoline vehicles in tunnels back in 1929, specifically because of carbon monoxide. The state inspector of mines came to the site, looked around, made his recommendations, enforced the ban. Get those trucks out. 6 companies ignored him. Ray Lyman Wilbur, Secretary of the Interior under Herbert Hoover, backed 6 companies. Wilbur was a medical doctor. He knew what carbon monoxide did to the human body. He knew, and he supported the decision anyway. The government sent federal lawyers to court to defend 6 companies when workers sued. Eventually, a panel of federal judges ruled that the Nevada Mining Code didn't apply to the Hoover Dam project. Not a mining operation, they said. Reclamation project, different rules. So the trucks kept running. The men kept breathing, and they started dying, not all at once, not dramatically. They just got weaker. Headaches, nausea, dizziness, shortness of breath. Then pneumonia, the doctors said. 42 men died of pneumonia during construction. 42? Not one of them listed as carbon monoxide poisoning. Not one. Want to know the strange part? 0 non-workers in Boulder City died of pneumonia during the entire construction period. Not one wife, not one child, not one shopkeeper or teacher or preacher. Just the men working underground. Pneumonia doesn't work that way. It spreads, moves through communities, kills the weak, the young, the old, the already sick. It doesn't selectively target healthy men in their 20s and 30s who all happen to work in the same tunnels. Ed Krause was one of the men who sued, claimed the carbon monoxide poisoning had made him impotent. 6 companies hired a prostitute, put her on the payroll, had her testify in court that Krause's equipment worked just fine, thank you. That's how they fought the lawsuit. Brought a woman into court to publicly humiliate a dying man. The workers lost. The trucks stayed. The tunnel crews kept drilling. What was it like to work a shift in those conditions? Imagine this: 3 a.m. graveyard shift. You climb onto the jumbo. Take your position on one of the 7 platforms. The jackhammer weighs 44 pounds. You hold it against the rock face. The compressed air hits. The bit starts chewing. The vibration runs through your arms, your shoulders, your chest. Your teeth chatter. After an hour, you can't feel your hands. The noise is a physical force. You can't hear the warnings, can't hear the shouts, can't hear the truck engines behind you, except as a low, grinding roar under the percussion of the drills. The heat presses on you like a weight. Sweat pours off. You drink water. It doesn't help. Your head starts to pound. Not from the noise, from the fumes. You don't know it's carbon monoxide. You just know you feel like hell. Your partner, 2 platforms up, slumps over, lets go of his drill. It keeps running, swinging on its mount. Someone shouts. You can't hear it. They pull him off, drag him outside. He comes back an hour later, or he doesn't. The jumbo backs out. The dynamite crew comes in. You grab a shovel or climb into a truck. Your job is to muck out the broken rock after the blast. Load it. Haul it to the spoil dumps in the side canyons. Drive as fast as you can, because you have a quota. A certain number of trips per shift. Miss your quota, you're fired. 5,000 men wanted your job, but you can't turn around in the tunnel, so you back in. Reverse the whole way to the working face. Load up. Drive forward to the exit. Dump the rock. Back in again. For 8 hours. In the dark. In the heat. Breathing exhaust. Your eyes burn. Your throat burns. Your chest feels tight. You tell yourself it's just the heat, just the dust, just the exhaustion. You don't know you're dying slowly. The cableway operators had it different. At least they worked in open air, but they couldn't see what they were doing. The control tower sat on the canyon rim. The cables stretched across to the opposite tower. The bucket swung somewhere in. Between, 700 feet down, moving fast. The operator had to drop that bucket onto a specific column. Sometimes a column only 25 feet square, from 700 feet up, while the bucket was swinging, while the wind was blowing, by feel. One operator described it later. You learned the rhythm. You felt the tension in the cable. You knew, or you thought you knew, where the bucket was. But you didn't know. Not really. You just hoped. They hoped, and they pulled the levers. And most of the time the bucket landed where it was supposed to. Sometimes it didn't. Sometimes it hit a worker. Sometimes it hit a form and cracked it. Sometimes the cable slipped and the bucket fell, and someone below had exactly enough time to understand what was about to happen to them. At least 13 workers were killed by cableway accidents. That's from one source, a YouTube video title I saw in the search results. I can't verify the number. The official records list 1 cableway fatality. 1. But think about the math. 1 bucket every 78 seconds. 2 years of continuous operation. How many buckets? How many swings? How many times did something go wrong? And how many times did they write it down? The puddlers, the men working the concrete, had no protection. No hard hats, not at first. The company didn't issue them. So the workers improvised, took their cloth caps, dipped them in coal tar, let them harden, created a shell that could stop a falling rock, invented the hard hat themselves because they were tired of watching their friends die from falling objects. By summer 1933, so many high scalers had been killed by rock slides that the company finally noticed. Finally, let the workers use the tar-hardened caps. Didn't mandate them. Didn't provide them. Just stopped telling men they couldn't wear them. That's what maintenance looked like. Fix what breaks. Replace who dies. Keep moving. The deadline's coming. The day they stopped counting. 3:20 a.m. early morning, 1931. Still dark outside, but that didn't matter in the tunnels. Always dark there. M.J. Sidmore, 37, miner, married. His wife lived in San Francisco. Frank Manning, 37, married. His wife was in Las Vegas, staying at the Oasis Auto Camp. Forrest Weathers, 32, shift boss. The three of them were working a tunnel on the Nevada side, 150 feet above the Colorado River. This wasn't one of the main diversion tunnels, this was smaller. A side passage for anchor bolts for the lower suspension bridge. T-shaped, tight quarters. They were packing holes with dynamite, wiring them up. Standard procedure: drill, pack, wire, retreat, blast. Except something went wrong. The blast came early. Premature detonation, nobody knows why. Bad wiring, a spark, a drill bit striking metal, just bad luck. The explosion tore through the tunnel. Sidmore died instantly. Manning took shrapnel to the skull, fractured. He was conscious, knew what had happened to him. They got him out, got him to the Boulder City Hospital. He lived until 7:15 the next morning, dying slowly, his wife by his side. Weathers got blown out of the tunnel, fell 70 to 80 feet down the canyon wall, landed on a slope. Somehow didn't die. Broken bones, internal injuries, but alive. That was the first major accident with names attached, but it wasn't the first death, and it sure as hell wasn't the last. A.O. George, mechanic, 6 companies, working his first shift, 35 minutes on the job, 11:30 p.m. He was at the auto repair station below the lower portals of the Nevada diversion tunnels. 2 trucks, both moving. George was between them. They crushed him. The coroner's jury report: fractured skull, fractured ribs on the left side, severed right arm, breaking and crushing of both legs, shock and hemorrhages. They put him in the ambulance, rushed him to Boulder City Hospital. He died hours later. The jury's conclusion: accident unavoidable. Unavoidable. Think about that word. Means nobody's fault. Just bad luck. Just the cost of doing business. How many accidents are unavoidable when you're working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, in 140-degree heat, breathing carbon monoxide, under a government deadline that costs $3,000 per day if you miss it? The explosions kept coming. Gus Enberg, 36, single, graveyard shift, 3:20 a.m. again. Something about that hour. Explosion in one of the tunnels. The report doesn't say which one. Just says he was injured. Died that afternoon at the hospital, age 36. His whole life ahead of him. 2 other men hurt in the same blast. H. Miller, 31, married, bruised legs. Douglas Yates, 28, single. Cuts on his right arm and leg. They survived. Enberg didn't. The falls were constant. 24 men fell to their deaths during construction. Some from the canyon walls while working as high scalers. Some from the scaffolding. Some from the intake towers, which rose 395 feet above the water. Patrick W. Tierney fell from one of those towers on December 20th, 1935. Bureau of Reclamation employee. He fell hundreds of feet, hit the water, drowned. Here's the thing about Patrick Tierney. His father was J.G. Tierney, also Bureau of Reclamation. J.G. drowned on December 20th, 1922, 13 years earlier, to the day. He was surveying the site, working from a barge in the Colorado River, fell in. The river took him. Neither man died during actual dam construction. J.G. was 8 years before construction started. Patrick died during construction, but he wasn't a 6 companies worker, so neither death appears in the official 96, but they both died for the dam. The official count is surgical. 96 industrial fatalities, men who died at the dam site from causes directly related to the work: drowning, blasting, falling rocks, falls from canyon walls, struck by heavy equipment, truck accidents, electrocution, machinery, cableway accidents, elevator accidents. The count doesn't include the men who died from heat. 16 of them between June 25th and July 26th, 1931 alone. 1 month, 16 dead. Heat prostration, not industrial fatalities, just men whose hearts stopped in 140-degree tunnels. The count doesn't include the 42 pneumonia deaths. Doesn't include the men who went home sick and died later from lung damage or carbon monoxide exposure. Doesn't include the men who killed themselves. One suicide in the official records. How many unofficial? How many men walked into the desert and didn't come back? Could they save him? That was the question. Every time someone went down. Sometimes, yes. Usually, no. The hospital in Boulder City did what it could, but a fractured skull from a premature blast, a crushed body from a truck accident, a man who fell 300 feet. There's only so much medicine can do. August 7th, 1931. The workers had enough. Entire workforce went on strike. Not because of the deaths, because 6 companies cut wages, reassigned tunnel workers to lower-paying jobs. 30 muckers, the men who loaded broken rock, were getting pay cuts. The rest walked out in solidarity. Within hours, 5,000 men were idle. They issued demands: clean water, flush toilets, ice water available at work sites, obey Nevada and Arizona mining laws. Those were the demands. Pretty basic stuff. Frank Crow called a meeting, told them the company refused, stopped all work, laid off the entire workforce except for a few office workers and carpenters, gave them until 5 p.m. to vacate the premises. Most men took their paychecks and left for Las Vegas, waited to see what would happen. The ones who stayed, law enforcement talked them into leaving 2 days later. August 13th, the company started hiring again. Strike over. The workers got nothing. Not one demand met. The company guaranteed there would be no further wage reductions. That's it. That's what they got for shutting down the biggest construction project in America. No clean water, no toilets, no ice, no safety regulations, just a promise they wouldn't cut wages again. The deaths continued. 26 men struck by falling debris, 26 struck by machinery or heavy equipment, 10 killed in explosions, 5 electrocuted from carelessly placed electrical lines, 3 drowned, 1 elevator accident, 1 cableway accident, officially. The newspaper reports are scattered, fragmentary. Names appear and disappear. Howard Cornelius, M.J. Sidmore, Frank Manning, Gus Enberg, A.O. George, Patrick Tierney, J.G. Tierney. These are the ones we know, the ones with names in the records. How many more died without making the newspapers? How many men were buried in unmarked graves because their families couldn't afford to ship the body home? How many were listed as quit in the company books when they really died somewhere between the canyon and Boulder City? We'll never know. What we know is this: 96 official, 42 pneumonia, 16 heat. That's 154. And that's just during construction. How many died later from lung damage? From silicosis, the lung disease you get from breathing rock dust for years. From carbon monoxide exposure that weakened their hearts and killed them 5 years down the line. The records don't say. The company didn't track it. The government didn't care. What happened next changed everything. The dam was finished. The monument they built in blood. March 1st, 1936. Secretary of the Interior. Harold Ickes formally accepted the dam on behalf of the federal government. More than 2 years ahead of schedule. Millions under budget. Frank Crow had done it. 6 companies had done it. The workers, the ones who survived, had done it. The Colorado River, for the first time in 12 million years, was under human control. The water backed up behind the dam. Lake Mead began to fill. 28 million acre-feet of water, enough to cover the entire state of Connecticut 10 feet deep. The largest man-made lake in the United States. Still is. 726 feet of concrete holding it back. 660 feet thick at the base. 45 feet at the top. An arch-gravity design. The weight of the water actually makes the dam stronger. Presses it into the canyon walls. Wedges it tighter. The hydroelectric turbines started spinning in October 1936. 17 generators, 230-foot-high powerhouse wings, 4 billion kilowatt-hours per year at peak output, enough to power 1.3 million people. The electricity built the ships and planes that won World War II. powered Los Angeles, Phoenix, Tucson, Las Vegas, made the Southwest possible. The water irrigated 2 million acres of farmland, turned desert into orchards, fed 20 million people, ended the annual floods that had devastated Southern California, provided reliable water to 7 states: Arizona, California, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, Wyoming, all of them drinking from the same river the dam had caged. The dam did everything it was supposed to do, and it did something else. It became a symbol. During the Depression, when everything seemed broken, when men couldn't find work and families were starving, Hoover Dam said this: "We can still build. We can still accomplish the impossible. We can still be great." 10,000 people showed up for the dedication on September 30th, 1935. Temperature hit 102 degrees. President Franklin Roosevelt gave a speech. Didn't mention Herbert Hoover's name once. Hoover wasn't invited. Political grudge. Roosevelt hated Hoover, blamed him for the Depression. The dam had been called Boulder Dam from 1933 to 1947. Roosevelt's administration refused to use Hoover's name. It took an act of Congress in 1947 to officially restore the name Hoover Dam, after the man who championed it, after the man who pushed it through when everyone said it was impossible. The machines that built it were scrapped. The 5 temporary cableways, dismantled after the powerhouse was finished in 1936. The drilling jumbos, broken down for parts or sold off. The 100-ton shovels, moved to other projects or retired. The buckets, repurposed or melted down. Only the 150-ton government cableway remains. Still there, still operational, still crossing the canyon. Everything else is gone, except the scars. Boulder City still exists. The houses are still there. The schools, the churches, the hospital where so many men died. Walk through Boulder City today, and you're walking through a town built specifically to house the workers who built the dam. Population now around 15,000. It never went away, never became a ghost town, just kept going. The dam never stopped working. 1995, they took core samples, tested the concrete, expected degradation, age, weakness, found the opposite. The concrete is still gaining strength, slowly, year by year. The chemical reaction that started in 1933 is still happening. The dam is still curing, still getting stronger. Durable concrete with compressive strength exceeding the range typically found in normal mass concrete, not subject to the alkali silica reaction that destroys other dams. The builders accidentally used non-reactive aggregate. Lucky. 7 million people visit every year. Stand on the crest. Look down. 726 feet to the river below. Look upstream. Lake Mead stretching to the horizon. 110 miles of water backed up behind the dam. Look at the intake towers rising out of the water like Art Deco rockets. 395 feet tall. Look at the powerhouse wings. The spillways. The whole massive structure. What they don't see are the men who died building it. M.J. Sidmore, Frank Manning, Howard Cornelius, Gus Enberg, A.O. George, the Tierney's father and son, 13 years apart to the day. The 42 pneumonia deaths that were probably carbon monoxide poisoning. The 16 who died from heat. The 24 who fell. The ones crushed by trucks or machinery. The ones electrocuted. The ones killed by cableway. Accidents that never made the official count. 96 names on the official list. Maybe 154. Maybe more. We'll never know the real number. The machines are gone, replaced by diesel equipment with ventilation, by concrete pumps and tower cranes, by OSHA regulations and safety protocols and laws that say you can't run gasoline trucks in enclosed tunnels, by mandatory hard hats, by workers' comp, by a legal system that doesn't let companies classify carbon monoxide deaths as pneumonia, by a world that learned from the deaths at Hoover Dam. The dam is still there, still doing its job, still holding back the Colorado, still generating power, still irrigating the desert, The men who built it are buried in cemeteries from California to Wyoming, their names carved in stone, if you're lucky. Some of them have no stone, no name, just a spot of desert where someone dug a hole and filled it in. Progress has a price. They paid it. Every drop of water, every kilowatt of power, every acre of irrigated farmland, every city in the Southwest that exists because the Colorado River was finally brought to heel. Paid for in blood, in broken bodies, in men who went into tunnels at 3 a.m. and never came out, in families that got telegrams, in widows who had to figure out how to feed their children alone, in mothers who buried sons. The machines that built Hoover Dam were the best technology available at the time. The most advanced drilling rigs, the biggest shovels, the most sophisticated cableway system ever designed, and they killed anyone who got too close. They killed the men who operated them, the men who maintained them, the men who worked below them, the men who breathed the fumes, the men who trusted the cables, the men who believed the company when it said the work was safe. They don't make them like that anymore. Not the machines, and not the men. The men who built Hoover Dam worked in conditions we wouldn't tolerate today, did things we wouldn't ask anyone to do, died in ways we've spent 90 years trying to prevent. They built something that will outlast us all, something that changed the American West forever, something that made modern life in the Southwest possible, and it cost them everything